Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore how technology is transforming multiple industries. But we also explore problems, challenges, threats. But it's not all doom and gloom because we try to focus heavily on solutions too. And today we explore a few cybersecurity trends and things to look out for. But I always say that cybersecurity is not just about IT and security analysts. Cybersecurity is actually everyone's responsibility now. And guess what? I want to do my part in that too and help educate people around overcoming the challenges around cybersecurity. So I'm going to be bravely stepping away from this microphone and moderating a video webinar with Keeper Security. So if you do have any burning questions, please register and let me know. I'll provide all the details in the description to this podcast. But as I've got a great face for radio, I thought we'd focus on cyber attacks on SMBs and how they're rising globally and becoming more targeted and sophisticated right here on this podcast before I even think about going on camera. And a great place to start here. Did you know that 66% of SMBs globally reported a cyber attack within the past 12 months? And that figure rises to 76% in the US. Keeper is the leading provider of zero-knowledge security and encryption software covering password management, dark web monitoring, digital file storage, and messaging. I could go on and on. But they've got an insightful report to share. So enough from me. I invite you to my kind of town, that's right, Chicago, so we can get Darren back on the show, who you may remember is the CEO and co-founder of Keeper Security. So make yourself comfortable and we'll get that conversation started. So a massive warm welcome back to the podcast, Darren. Now, you have been on before, but we're going to have a few listeners that might have missed our previous conversation. So can I ask that you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. This is Darren Guccione. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Keeper Security. We're headquartered in Chicago with 4 global offices. We make password security software that runs on every smartphone, tablet, computer for both individuals, families, and businesses. And we protect you against password-related security breaches and cyber threats.
Excellent. And one of the reasons I was incredibly excited to get you back on the show today is because, of course, it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month in the US and Cyber Sec Month here in Europe. So I've got to ask, what is the key message being delivered in the cybersecurity industry on both sides of the Atlantic?
I think the key right now is that, we're trying to build global awareness in terms of the importance of having a cybersecurity mindset, just because the attacks are on, just such a massive rise, increasing dramatically, especially with small to medium-sized businesses, not just with individuals, but now with SMBs being the primary attack target for cyber criminals globally.
And another reason I wanted to get you back on the podcast is to talk about the survey findings in the 2019 Global State of Cybersecurity in Small and Medium-Sized Business study. So can you set the scene and tell me more about that survey and indeed the respondents, just so we can get a bit of a picture of what that study represents?
Sure. So this is the 3rd consecutive year that we've commissioned the Pottman Institute to conduct this cybersecurity study for us. And it's a fantastic opportunity for us to really understand more about the global landscape, whereas in the prior 2 years, we focused on what was happening in the US. This year, we decided to understand what was happening both here and in Europe. So, our survey really focused on the readiness of SMBs in protecting themselves against data breaches, the number of data breaches that have occurred, and the primary factors around causation. So we sent out surveys. We received responses from roughly 2,400 SMBs, mainly from their IT and IT security departments in the United States, United Kingdom, the DACH region, the Benelux region, including Scandinavia, and found that the US does lead the world in cyber attacks. And we can cover a few of those points. I know we're going to get more into that next week with Dr. Larry Poneman. But the findings, were somewhat alarming because we're seeing the elevated number of attacks really focused on, again, the SMB category. And what's interesting is that if you look at what happened, just in the U.S. alone, there's been a massive increase, right? So, in 2019, 76% of U.S. businesses that we surveyed reported a breach in the past 12 months. And that grew from 2016, where only 56 reported a breach. So we're seeing just, this massive lift in terms of the prevalence of these attacks.
And what do you think the cause of that big uplift in attacks is? Because like you say, the first things that, when I looked at the report, the first things that stood out for me was the increase of 20% since 2016. And overall, the attacks are increasing dramatically. 76% of US companies were attacked within the last 12 months, which is up 55% from 2016. I mean, can you expand on some of those findings? Because it's in some ways it's frightening, but in the same way, it's, we're going into solution mode now, and how can we actually get around this and make it better?
Yeah, so there's two answers to that. So the first, I'll just talk about what's happening with SMBs. So SMBs are low-hanging fruit for cyber criminals because they don't typically have advanced IT staff on hand. They don't have really like a formal cybersecurity strategy. Many of them, just through lack of education and understanding of what's happening, they typically don't know where to start. So there needs to be some, elevated education, from vendors such as that of Keeper. And a lot of these attacks are, reliant on what we call deception. So attacks, such as phishing attacks through email or social engineering or other web-based attacks are on the rise. And so, when I talk about cybersecurity, and I do this quite frequently in keynote speeches globally, what's interesting is that when you talk to larger enterprise, they have a good grasp on this, right? Because there's 4 prongs of cybersecurity that we talk about, which is prevention, detection, remediation, and response. And then when you talk to an SMB, they typically don't even know where to start. They know, they have a general understanding of the term with cybersecurity, but they really need some help and curation in terms of being guided through the process and understanding, what tools, what applications can they buy to start protecting their businesses against these massive breaches and attacks.
And one of the big changes that I've certainly seen is traditionally in IT departments, what is on the network and what is inside the network is completely trusted, and everything outside is distrusted. But of course, we're finding more and more that many of the biggest vulnerabilities are on the inside, isn't it?
That's right. And so we call that privileged access management, really making sure that we understand what's going on inside the business, because typically what we see is that when you have an employee or an individual that comes into a company, if they personally have bad password habits or bad cybersecurity, what we call hygiene, they're going to bring those bad habits into the business. So if there's no governance or controls around those devices, such as like a smartphone, tablet, or even the desktop or computer or the notebook, then you're going to have a proliferation in terms of the problem that you'll see inside of a business, because nothing really changes, right? We all transact on our personal devices at home. I know that I use my personal smartphone to transact for the company's benefit after hours. Well, the challenge for an SMB and for any larger enterprise for that matter is you understand that your team members are going to transact on confidential information, very sensitive information on personal devices. So you want to own that information and you want to own that protection. But how do you mandate that when you don't own the physical device? So that becomes the BYOD challenge. So at the end of the day, we work really hard as an organization, on these thought leadership and this, high level and more granular research to make sure that we understand what's happening, and then it helps guide us as a company. Okay, here's how we're going to educate, the SMBs in terms of the fastest and most cost-effective way that they can protect themselves from a data breach.
And globally, I think it was 66% of SMBs reported attacks within the last 12 months. I mean, does that figure surprise you?
Not at all. So, we're continuing to see more prevalent and more sophisticated attacks. Although, phishing, ransomware, we're seeing very similar, attacks, just more pervasively, a lot more credential stuffing just by virtue of the amount of stolen credentials from public data breaches that are now available on the dark web. So the dark web monitoring becomes, a big issue. But we were not at all surprised, by, the elevated attack levels and the percentages that came back from this study. And, hackers are, they're just becoming more sophisticated. They're finding new ways, to probe security systems while it takes SMBs, they're just trying to find out, well, what can we do to build a strategy, noting like we may not have that much money. How do we put it at work and how do we protect ourselves? So this research is really helping, shape the industry, not just us as a company, but more importantly, we want to do this for the public good, right? To educate people on why are these metrics going, to 66%, and why are they now over 70%? And some of the respondents, we received, one really alarming figure, and we'll talk more about that soon with Dr. Poneman, that, 88% of U.S. respondents indicated that they spend less than 20% of their IT budget on security. And to us, that's a huge problem, because you want to start thinking about building cybersecurity into your overall IT budget and your strategy. The security needs to be actually the nucleus of the strategy, not the afterthought of the strategy.
So many great points there. And like you said earlier in the podcast, a cybersecurity mindset is absolutely crucial now. And you have surveyed a lot of IT personnel, but like you said, the secret is into educating people, because security and cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility now. So are you seeing any attempts to increase that education across companies and customers that you're working with?
I think so. I think, the security vendors, we attend, for example, the RSA Security Conference in San Francisco, which I would call, the best security conference in the world, without a doubt. You have over 250 of the vendors that are really dominating and changing the landscape. They are the innovators. We have, major presence at that show. And I would say that, more vendors are starting to realize that, it's not just the larger enterprise that need, professional services and effective service offerings to really thwart these attacks, but the SMB channel, which, represents 80% of the global economy. You just can't ignore them, just because on an individual basis, they're a lot smaller in scale, but in the aggregate, they represent such an important part of the global ecosystem, and they deserve world-class cybersecurity protection at a fair price. I mean, that's just the way that we think. And at the end of the day, this study just points so clearly to that.
And predictably, the study also highlighted that one of the biggest problems for businesses of all sizes seems to be insufficient personnel. I mean, can you expand on the findings there as well?
Yeah, it's just, at the end of the day, if you look at any small business, most businesses today don't have IT staff on hand. They just don't. It's no different than how a company doesn't have an in-house lawyer or sometimes an in-house accountant. They typically outsource that. In the case of IT, you're seeing more SMBs outsource IT infrastructure, data backup and recovery, setting up and or building computer systems, setting up IT racking or networks. Any of that is typically being outsourced now to managed service providers and managed security service providers. So I think, we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. Right now, roughly 40% of all SMBs in the United States use an MSP for their IT. And now you're going to start seeing more MSPs that traditionally were focused on data backup and recovery, now getting more into offering cybersecurity services for their end customers.
And we are reaching that time of the year where people are going to be starting to look into their crystal balls and make predictions of tech trends for 2020. But in the world of cybersecurity and, more importantly, the threats and challenges ahead, is there anything that particularly stands out for you and that you're going to be following closely?
I mean, nothing outside of the study. I think what we're seeing right now is that, the phishing, the ransomware, we're seeing a lot of those attacks. And what's really happening now that I think you're going to start hearing more about are the account takeovers. And the account takeovers are really being fueled by these public data breaches where, millions of key pairs between username and password, we call those, credential pairs, are being stolen. They're being placed on the dark web. They're being monetized by cyber criminals, right? Because they buy and sell those to themselves and different parties. And they take that information and they do, very structured dictionary attacks against, unsuspecting SMBs. Most of the time, unfortunately, SMBs don't even know that their systems are being breached. And this is the really dangerous thing, right? So can you imagine if somebody's in your network, for 3 months, hiving off and stealing, a ton of personal identifiable information for your clients, and then they're taking that and they're monetizing it and reselling it. This is what's happening. The other thing that you're seeing is, of course, on the ransomware side, where they lock a computer, you can't get into a database, and you have to pay a ransom for them to unlock it for you. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of these. But 90%, I would say, of all of these attacks are always related to some password security problem. At the end of the day, it all funnels into you've got to put a cloak of armor and really strong controls around the passwords in your organization, the use of two-factor authentication, and other identity and access management controls.
And so much of what we've talked about today around these attacks are going to resonate with so many business leaders. But the cybersecurity industry is an incredibly crowded marketplace too. So could I just ask what it is that you think makes Keeper unique and different, or what is your approach that's different to other solutions out there, would you say?
The key for us is, number one is security.
Yeah.
So there's really two prongs of our solution. The first is security. Bar none, we look at security objectively based on, everything from vulnerability testing to pen testing to SOC certifications to ISO certifications and other, third-party audit and attestation engagements. We, have the strongest security objectively in the industry. We have what's called a zero-knowledge security architecture, which means we don't do any server-side encryption or decryption of people's data. All of the encryption keys and all of that architecture is pushed client-side, locally on the client's device, or through a VPC on-prem for more of the sophisticated deployments. So at the end of the day, it's a very sophisticated and very hardened architecture from a cybersecurity standpoint. And then in terms of usability, if you look at the usability of the application, we operate across every smartphone, tablet, computer, every operating system. PC Magazine rated us as the best password manager in both 2018. We received Editor's Choice, for 2018 as well as 2019. Received the Publisher's Choice Cybersecurity Password Management InfoSec Award in 2019. And, the accolades just keep coming in. For a security product, we like to rate ourselves based on what customers say. And you can't really, you can't get more, finite and genuine than that. And if you look at just like the latest version on iOS, for instance, which has over 120,000 reviews, we have a 4.9 out of 5 rating, which is almost unheard of for a security product. Because traditionally, when you talk about security products, with users, many of them just don't like using it because they automatically think that, if I'm using a security product, they're going to be difficult to use and they're going to impair my productivity. Well, at Keeper, we're fanatical about unifying ease of use and security into a single application, so that not only does it make you more secure, it makes you more productive, and it's an app that you actually love using all day long. So those are really the things that we focus on here.
I'm genuinely looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into this subject with you next week for the webinar. And for listeners that would love to carry on that conversation with us and take it a step further, what is the best way of signing up to that webinar? Can I ask you share the details on how people can sign up and get involved and speak directly to us both?
Sure. So we'll give you an HTTPS address. It's not that short, but it's straightforward. So you're going to go to keepersecurity.com/webinars.html. So if you just go to our keepersecurity.com website, you'll find the webinars link there. And then there'll be a Ponemon 2019 link. You'll see it right there, and feel free to sign up. It's going to be a fantastic event.
And just to make it easy for everyone listening, on the podcast description, wherever you're listening to this show, I'll paste the link directly into there, and also on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. And yes, we will be delving deeper into the study and tackling the big topics such as phishing, ransomware, and account takeovers, but there'll also be a big focus on workable solutions too. So generally looking forward to that. And more than anything, though, a big thank you for taking the time to come and join me today, Darren. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Chatting with Darren offline, we got talking about how it's just not enough to simply be aware of cyber threats and their existence, because it's now absolutely critical that businesses take the next step towards cybersecurity preparedness and actually get a strong prevention strategy in place and have more of a proactive than reactive approach. But this is a conversation that we're going to be continuing in a video webinar this week, and there's links in the podcast description and on my website over at techblogwriter.co.uk, so you can sign up. So I hope to see you all there. So in this episode, rather than ask you to email me a question, why not turn up in the webinar and ask me or Darren directly? Because I think it'd be kind of nice to chat to you live for once. What do you think? Glad you said that. So remember to register. I'll hopefully speak live one-to-one with you very soon. If not, don't worry. I'll still see you bright and early tomorrow morning with another guest with no judgments passed. Because either way, we're stuck with each other on this journey called life. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.